Charlotte Brooks pressed her camera against the hedge, angling for the perfect shot of the bride and groom dancing under string lights in the Presidio Heights garden. She should not have been there. The wedding was invitation only, security was tight, and she was definitely trespassing. But desperate times called for desperate measures, and Charlie was very desperate. Her father's medical bills had piled up like autumn leaves, each one representing another day he waited for the surgery that could save his life. The legitimate wedding photography jobs had dried up after her former business partner stole half their clients and Charlie's professional reputation along with them. Now she took whatever work she could find, including selling unauthorized photos to society magazines that paid well for exclusive glimpses into elite celebrations. The evening air carried the scent of roses and champagne as Charlie adjusted her lens, capturing the moment when the elderly grandmother embraced the newlyweds. Perfect. That shot alone would fetch at least $2,000 from Metropolitan Weddings magazine. $2,000 toward the $75,000 still needed for her father's operation. Someone cleared their throat behind her. Charlie's heart stopped. She turned slowly, expecting security, and instead found herself staring at the most striking man she had ever seen. Tall and lean, with dark hair that fell across his forehead and eyes the color of storm clouds, he wore a perfectly tailored, charcoal suit that probably cost more than her rent. There was something familiar about his face, though she could not immediately place it. "That was quite impressive," the man said, his voice low and measured. "You have a good eye for emotional moments." Charlie clutched her camera protectively. "I can explain." "Can you?" One corner of his mouth lifted slightly. "I would be interested to hear how you explain trespassing at a private wedding reception." "I'm a photographer," Charlie said, lifting her chin defiantly. "I capture moments people want to remember. Without their permission, people hire me all the time after they see my unauthorized work. I'm providing a service." The man studied her for a long moment, and Charlie felt uncomfortably exposed under his gaze. She noticed he held a glass of champagne, but had not taken a single sip. Everything about him seemed controlled and deliberate, from his posture to the way he watched her without blinking. "What's your name?" he asked finally. "Charlotte Brooks." "Most people call me Charlie." "And how much do you charge for your services?" "Charlie." She hesitated. Something in his tone suggested this was not a simple question. "Depends on the event. A full wedding package runs about $5,000. "I see." He set down his untouched champagne on a nearby table. "What if I told you I had a job that would pay 100 times that amount?" Charlie laughed nervously. "Then I would say you're either joking or you need something illegal photographed." "Neither." He reached into his jacket pocket and produced a business card. "My name is Vincent Sterling. I own Sterling Innovations." The name hit Charlie like cold water. Vincent Sterling, the tech billionaire who had revolutionized data security and then vanished from public life 5 years ago. Forbes estimated his worth at over $3 billion, though he refused all interviews and public appearances. The fact that he stood before her at a random wedding seemed impossible. "You're Vincent Sterling," Charlie repeated stupidly, taking the card with trembling fingers. "I am. And I have a proposition for you, one that has nothing to do with photography." "I don't understand." Vincent glanced around the garden, ensuring they were alone. "Not here. Come to my office tomorrow morning. 10 o'clock. He gestured to the card. "The address is listed." "Wait," Charlie said as he turned to leave. "What kind of proposition?" He looked back at her, and something unreadable flickered across his features. "The kind that could change both our lives. If you're brave enough to consider it, that's not an answer. Tomorrow, Miss Brooks, 10 o'clock. And bring your courage. You'll need it." Vincent Sterling walked away, disappearing into the crowd of wedding guests like a ghost. Charlie stood frozen by the hedge, her heart racing. The rational part of her brain screamed warnings. Mysterious billionaires with vague propositions usually meant trouble. But the desperate part, the part that saw her father's pale face in the hospital bed every morning, wondered what harm could come from one meeting. That night, Charlie sat in her cramped studio apartment in the Mission District, researching Vincent Sterling on her laptop. The information was surprisingly sparse for someone so wealthy. He had founded Sterling Innovations at 26, built it into an empire by 30, then abruptly retreated from public life. No scandal explained his disappearance, no obvious reason for his reclusiveness. The few photographs showed a man who looked uncomfortable in crowds, who never smiled for cameras. In every image, his eyes held the same guarded quality she had seen in the garden. A man protecting secrets. Charlie's phone buzzed with a text from her father's nurse. "He's asking about you. Surgery consult scheduled for next week. Still need to confirm payment." She closed her laptop and stared at Vincent Sterling's business card propped against her coffee mug. Tomorrow was Saturday. She had no other plans, except visiting her father and pretending everything would be fine. What harm could come from one meeting with a billionaire? At 9:45 the next morning, Charlie stood before the gleaming glass tower that housed Sterling Innovations headquarters. The building pierced the San Francisco skyline like a silver needle, all sharp angles and reflective surfaces. She had dressed in her only professional outfit, a navy blazer over a white blouse, and felt woefully underdressed for whatever awaited inside. The security guard at the front desk seemed to expect her. "Miss Brooks, top floor. Mr. Sterling is waiting." 30. Elevator ride took less than a minute but felt like an hour. Charlie's reflection stared back at her from the polished doors, showing a young woman with auburn hair pulled into a practical ponytail, green eyes wide with apprehension, and absolutely no idea what she was walking into. The elevator opened, directly into Vincent Sterling's office. Not a reception area or hallway, but straight into a space that took her breath away. Floor-to-ceiling windows showcased the entire bay, from the Golden Gate Bridge to Alcatraz. The office itself was minimalist, all clean lines and expensive simplicity. Vincent stood by the windows, his back to her, hands clasped behind him. He wore dark jeans and a black sweater, somehow making casual look like a calculated choice. "Thank you for coming," he said without turning around. "Your text said it was urgent." "It is." He finally faced her, and Charlie was struck again by how his presence seemed to fill the enormous space. "Miss Brooks, I need you to marry me." Charlie actually laughed. "Excuse me?" "Not a real marriage, a contract. 3 months of public appearances as my wife. In exchange, I'll pay you $500,000. The number hung in the air between them, impossible and tempting. Charlie gripped her camera bag tighter, using it as an anchor to reality. "This is insane." "It's business," Vincent corrected. "My grandmother controls 60% of Sterling Innovations shares. She refuses to transfer them unless I'm married. She believes a family man is a stable man. So get married. Plenty of women would line up for the chance." "I don't want someone who wants me for my money. I need someone who needs money for something else." His eyes met hers with uncomfortable intensity. "Your father's medical bills total $75,000. The surgery he needs could save his life. $500,000 would cover that and set you both up comfortably for years." Charlie felt her stomach drop. "How do you know about my father?" "I make it my business to know about people I intend to work with. After seeing you at the wedding, I had my team research your background. You're talented, desperate, and most importantly, you have integrity. The trespassing photography is your only ethical compromise, and you do it for someone you love. This is completely different from taking unauthorized photos." "Is it?" Vincent moved closer, and Charlie forced herself not to step back. "We both need something. I need temporary legitimacy in my grandmother's eyes. You need money to save your father's life. It's a transaction. And after 3 months? Amicable divorce. You walk away with your payment and an excellent settlement. I get my company's shares and control of Sterling Innovations. Everyone wins. Charlie's mind raced. $500,000. Her father's surgery. No more desperate. Photography gigs. No more lying awake, calculating impossible budgets. But the cost was marrying a stranger, even temporarily. Lying to his family. Compromising herself in ways that made unauthorized wedding photos seem innocent. There must be conditions, Charlie said carefully. There always are with arrangements like this. Something flickered across Vincent's face. There is one condition, but we can discuss it after you agree to the arrangement. That's not how this works. I need to know everything before I agree to anything. Vincent was quiet for a moment, a muscle in his jaw tightening. The condition involves someone very important to me, someone I haven't told you about yet. But I promise you, Charlie, it's nothing that would put you in danger or compromise you inappropriately. That's not reassuring. It's all I can offer right now. He pulled a folder from his desk. Here's the contract. Take it home. Read it thoroughly. You have 24 hours to decide. Charlie took the folder with numb fingers. Inside, she glimpsed legal documents, bank statements, medical records for her father that Vincent should not have had access to. The invasion of privacy should have angered her. Instead, she felt only the weight of impossible choices. My father's surgery consult is scheduled for Monday, Charlie said quietly. The doctors won't proceed without payment confirmation. I know. Vincent's expression softened almost imperceptibly. Which is why you have until tomorrow evening to decide. If you agree, I'll have the funds transferred immediately. Your father will have his surgery within the week. Charlie clutched the folder to her chest. And if I refuse, then I find someone else. Your father's situation continues as it is, and we never see each other again. The unspoken threat was gentler than the one in the garden, but no less real. Charlie had 24 hours to decide between her principles and her father's life. Between staying true to herself and saving the person she loved most in the world. She turned toward the elevator, then paused. What makes you think I'll say yes? Vincent's smile was sad and knowing. Because I did my research, Charlie, and I know exactly the kind of person you are. You'll sacrifice anything for the people you love, even yourself. The elevator doors closed on his words, and Charlie rode down 90 floors with her future weighing heavy in her hands. She did not know then that Vincent Sterling's secret condition would change everything, that the arrangement would become real in ways neither of them anticipated, or that the biggest secret was not the condition itself, but what it would reveal about both their hearts. All she knew was that by tomorrow evening, she would have to choose. And somehow, she already knew what that choice would be. Charlie signed the contract on Sunday evening. By Monday morning, her father's surgery was confirmed and scheduled. By Tuesday, she was moving her belongings into Vincent Sterling's penthouse in Pacific Heights, feeling like she had stepped into someone else's life. The penthouse occupied the entire top floor of a building overlooking the bay. Everything was sleek and modern, from the marble floors to the floor-to-ceiling windows that made Charlie feel like she was floating above the city. Vincent showed her to a bedroom suite that was larger than her entire apartment, complete with a walk-in closet and bathroom that looked like something from a luxury hotel. Your space, Vincent said simply. I'm at the other end of the hall. We share the common areas but otherwise maintain our privacy. Very civilized, Charlie murmured, setting down her single suitcase. The contrast between her worn luggage and the pristine surroundings felt like a metaphor for the entire arrangement. My grandmother expects to meet you this Friday. Family dinner at her estate in Napa Valley. Vincent leaned against the doorframe, hands in his pockets. She'll be evaluating you, testing whether our marriage is legitimate. Wonderful. No pressure at all. She's formidable, but fair. Just be yourself. Well, the version of yourself who would marry me. Charlie turned to face him fully. And what version is that exactly? We barely know each other? How am I supposed to convince your grandmother we're in love? Something complicated crossed Vincent's features. We don't need to convince her we're in love, just that we're committed to making the marriage work. There's a difference. The week passed in a blur of preparation. Vincent hired a stylist who filled Charlie's new closet with designer clothes. A media consultant coached her on handling potential press encounters. A private investigator briefed her on Vincent's family history, his business empire, and the complex dynamics of the Sterling family trust. What nobody briefed her on was the secret condition Vincent had mentioned. He deflected every attempt she made to discuss it, promising they would address it after the grandmother meeting. Charlie tried to push down her growing unease, focusing instead on her father's successful surgery and recovery. Friday evening arrived too quickly. Charlie stood before the mirror in a silk emerald dress that probably cost more than her car, wondering who the sophisticated woman staring back at her was. Vincent appeared in the doorway wearing a dark suit, and for a moment they simply looked at each other. "You look beautiful," he said quietly. "I look expensive. There's a difference." "Charlie," he stepped into the room, "I know this is difficult, but I appreciate what you're doing, for both of us." The drive to Napa took 90 minutes. Vincent's hands gripped the steering wheel of his Tesla with white knuckles, the only outward sign of his tension. He had barely spoken since they left the city, and Charlie felt her own anxiety building with each passing mile. The Sterling estate sprawled across 20 acres of vineyard-covered hills. The main house was a stunning combination of modern architecture and old-world elegance, all stone and glass and carefully cultivated gardens. Charlie's stomach twisted as Vincent pulled up the circular driveway. "Last chance to run," she joked weakly. "Too late for both of us," Vincent replied, but he reached over and squeezed her hand briefly. The gesture surprised her with its comfort. Vincent's grandmother, Margaret Sterling, was exactly as intimidating as Charlie had feared. Tall and regal at 78, with silver hair pulled into an elegant chignon and eyes that missed nothing, she greeted them in the foyer with a critical gaze that swept over Charlie like a searchlight. "So you're the photographer who captured my grandson's heart," Margaret said, her tone suggesting this was highly unlikely. "Charlotte Brooks, ma'am. Please call me Charlie." "I'll call you Charlotte. Charlie is a boy's name." Margaret turned to Vincent. "The family is waiting in the dining room. Your sister brought Rosie." Charlie felt Vincent stiffen beside her. "I didn't know Rosie would be here." "It's a family dinner, Vincent. She's family. Or have you forgotten?" They followed Margaret through the house, and Charlie whispered to Vincent, "Who's Rosie?" "I'll explain later," he muttered, but his jaw was tight. The dining room held 8 people seated around a massive mahogany table. Charlie recognized Vincent's sister from the briefing materials, a striking woman named Victoria who watched them enter with curious eyes. Beside Victoria sat a small girl with dark curls and Vincent's storm-gray eyes. The child stared at her plate, not looking up even when they entered. Dinner was an interrogation disguised as polite conversation. Margaret asked pointed questions about how Charlie and Vincent met, how quickly they had married, and why they had kept the relationship so private. Charlie navigated the questions, carefully, sticking to the story they had rehearsed, but she could feel Margaret's skepticism like a physical presence. Halfway through the meal, Charlie noticed the little girl had not eaten anything or spoken a single word. She sat perfectly still, her hands folded in her lap, eyes fixed on the untouched food before her. "Rosie hasn't been very social lately," Victoria said, catching Charlie's gaze. "It's been a difficult time." "How old are you, Rosie?" Charlie asked gently. The child did not respond or acknowledge that Charlie had spoken. Vincent's expression had gone carefully blank, but Charlie saw pain flicker in his eyes. "Rosie doesn't speak," Margaret said bluntly. "She hasn't said a word in over 2 years, not since her mother left." Charlie felt like she had been struck. Vincent had a daughter who did not speak, and he had never mentioned her existence. The rest of the dinner passed in a haze. Charlie smiled and nodded and responded to questions automatically, but her mind reeled with this revelation. As dessert was served, Vincent excused himself to take a phone call, and Margaret leaned closer to Charlie. "My grandson has been through considerable pain," Margaret said quietly. "His wife abandoned him and their daughter without explanation." Rosie stopped speaking the day her mother left. "No medical cause. The doctors call it selective mutism triggered by trauma." "I'm so sorry," Charlie whispered, watching Rosie push a piece of cake around her plate. "Vincent hasn't dated anyone since. Hasn't brought anyone to family events, then suddenly he's married to a woman none of us have met." Margaret's eyes bore into Charlie. "You'll forgive me for being suspicious." After dinner, Victoria found Charlie in the garden where she had escaped for air. The evening was cool, stars beginning to appear above the vineyard hills. "He didn't tell you about Rosie, did he?" Victoria said. Charlie shook her head, not trusting. Her voice, "That's Vincent. He keeps his pain locked away where nobody can see it." Victoria sighed. "Rosie lives with me during the week. Vincent sees her on weekends, but it's hard for both of them. She's a constant reminder of what he lost, and he doesn't know how to reach her anymore." "What happened to her mother?" "Nobody knows. Christine just vanished one morning. Left a note saying she couldn't handle the pressure of being Vincent's wife anymore. When Rosie realized her mother was gone, she stopped talking. She hasn't spoken since." Charlie felt tears prick her. "Guys, that's heartbreaking. Vincent hired the best therapists, speech pathologists, and child psychologists in the country. Nothing has worked. Rosie's doctor suggested she needs a female presence in her life, someone who isn't a therapist or teacher, someone who could help her feel safe enough to use her voice again." Understanding crashed over Charlie like a wave. "That's the condition. That's what Vincent hasn't told me." Victoria nodded. "He needs you to bond with Rosie, to help her heal. He probably didn't tell you because he knew it would sound manipulative. Like he was using you." "Because he is using me," Charlie said, but her anger felt hollow. She thought of the silent little girl at dinner, of Vincent's carefully controlled, pain of Margaret's fierce protectiveness of her family. "Maybe," Victoria admitted, "or maybe he's desperate. Sometimes love makes us do questionable things." Charlie found Vincent in his childhood bedroom, standing by the window overlooking the vineyards. He turned when she entered, and the vulnerability in his expression nearly broke her heart. "You have a daughter," Charlie said. "Yes. And you didn't. Think that was important to mention before I agreed to marry you." Vincent ran a hand through his hair. "I was afraid you'd say no. So you manipulated me instead." "I gave you an opportunity to save your father's life. That wasn't manipulation." "And the secret condition? The one you conveniently forgot to explain?" Charlie's voice rose despite her efforts to stay calm. "You expect me to somehow fix your daughter's trauma, to play therapist along with playing wife." "I don't expect you to fix anything," Vincent said quietly. "I just hoped that maybe, if Rosie had someone kind in her life, someone who wasn't carrying all the weight of our past, she might feel safe enough to speak again." Charlie wanted to stay angry, but she kept seeing Rosie's small, silent form at the dinner table. "I'm not qualified for this. I'm a photographer, not a child psychologist." "I know, but you have something all those qualified professionals don't." Vincent stepped closer. "You have a gift for capturing moments, for seeing beauty and emotion that others miss. Maybe that's what Rosie needs. Not another therapist, but someone who can help her see the world as beautiful again." "That's a lot of pressure to put on a fake wife," Charlie whispered. "I know. And if you want to back out of our arrangement, I'll understand. I'll still pay for your father's surgery. You have my word." Charlie looked at this man who had seemed so controlled and invulnerable a week ago. Now she saw the cracks in his armor, the pain he carried, the desperate hope he tried to hide. She thought of Rosie's gray eyes, so like her father's, staring at nothing. She thought of her own father, recovering because Vincent had kept his promise. "I need complete honesty from now on," Charlie said finally. "No more secrets. No more conditions you forgot to mention." Relief flooded Vincent's features. "I promise. And I can't guarantee anything with Rosie. I'll try, but I won't give you false hope. Just trying is more than I have now." Charlie nodded slowly. "Then I guess I'm about to become a stepmother, even if it's only temporary." Vincent's smile was small, but genuine. "Thank you, Charlie. You have no idea what this means." But as Charlie lay in bed that night in the Sterling Estate's guest room, she wondered if Vincent understood what it meant. She had agreed to fake a marriage for money. Now she was agreeing to try healing a broken child's heart. The lines between transaction and genuine care were blurring faster than she could track. And somewhere in the complicated mess of contracts and conditions, Charlie realized her own heart was in danger of becoming involved. Not just with silent, hurting Rosie, but with the man who loved his daughter enough to marry a stranger in hopes of saving her. The arrangement was supposed to be simple. 3 months, $500,000, walk away clean. But nothing about Vincent Sterling or his broken family was simple. And Charlie was beginning to suspect that walking away clean was no longer an option. The next 6 weeks transformed Charlie's life in ways she never anticipated. She began spending weekends with Rosie, picking the little girl up from Victoria's house on Saturday mornings and bringing her to the penthouse. At first, Rosie remained, silent and withdrawn, clutching a worn stuffed rabbit and watching Charlie with cautious eyes. Charlie did not try to force conversation or apply therapeutic techniques she did not understand. Instead, she did what felt natural. She brought her camera and showed Rosie how to look at the world through a lens. They photographed flowers in Golden Gate Park, seagulls at the marina, and clouds shifting over the bay. Charlie never asked Rosie to speak, never pressured her for responses. She simply shared her world. Slowly, something shifted. Rosie began pointing at things she wanted photographed. She smiled when Charlie made silly faces behind the camera. She started arranging small objects into compositions for their photo sessions, displaying an artistic eye that surprised everyone. Vincent watched these interactions from a careful distance, afraid to intrude on the fragile connection forming between his daughter and his temporary wife. But Charlie saw how his expression softened when Rosie laughed, how he kept every photo Charlie took of his daughter, how he had stopped looking quite so haunted. The problem was that Charlie's feelings for Vincent had become dangerously real. She noticed how he always made coffee exactly the way she liked it, how he asked about her father's recovery every single day, how he sat in the living room reading while she and Rosie did art projects, not participating, but present, creating, a sense of family that made Charlie's heart ache. She had not signed up for this. She had signed up for a transaction, for playing a role, not for falling in love with a man who was paying her to pretend. One Saturday afternoon in November, Charlie and Rosie sat on the penthouse balcony painting watercolors. The autumn sun cast golden light across the bay, and Rosie was carefully mixing colors to capture the exact shade of the water. Vincent had gone to his office for a few hours, leaving them alone. Charlie was helping Rosie clean her brushes when the little girl suddenly grabbed her hand. Charlie looked down to find Rosie staring at her with intensity, her gray eyes bright with something that looked like determination. "Charlie," Rosie whispered. The word was so soft, Charlie thought she had imagined it. But then Rosie said it again, louder this time. "Charlie!" Charlie dropped to her knees, her heart hammering. "Rosie! Oh, sweetheart, you spoke!" "Stay," Rosie said, her voice rusty from disuse but clear. Please stay. Tears streamed down Charlie's face as she pulled Rosie into a hug. I'm here. I'm right here. Don't leave like Mommy. Rosie's small hands clutched Charlie's shirt. Don't go away. Charlie's heart shattered and rebuilt itself in that moment. This child, this beautiful broken child, had found her voice again, and she was using it to beg Charlie not to abandon her. I won't leave you, Charlie promised, knowing even as she said it that she was making a commitment the contract did not cover. I promise, Rosie. When Vincent came home and heard his daughter speak for the first time in 2 years, he wept. He knelt beside Rosie and Charlie on the balcony, and his daughter threw her arms around his neck. Daddy, Rosie said, Charlie makes the sad go away. Vincent looked at Charlie over his daughter's head, and the emotion in his eyes was so raw, so exposed, that Charlie had to look away. This was real now. All of it was terrifyingly, complicatingly real. That evening, after Rosie had been returned to Victoria with excited plans for speech therapy, Vincent opened a bottle of wine and joined Charlie on the balcony where the miracle had occurred. Thank you, he said simply. I don't have words adequate enough. You don't need to thank me. Rosie did the hard part. She found her courage. Because of you. Vincent turned to face her. Charlie, I need to tell you something. Before he could continue, his phone rang. He glanced at the screen and his expression darkened. It's my grandmother. I should take this. Charlie watched the Golden Gate Bridge lights come on as Vincent spoke in terse sentences. When he ended the call, his face was ashen. She knows, he said flatly. Margaret hired a private investigator. She has copies of our contract, bank statements showing the payment to you, everything. She's calling an emergency board meeting tomorrow. She intends to contest my claim to the company shares. Charlie felt cold, despite the mild evening. What happens now? She'll expose the arrangement, claim I committed fraud to manipulate her. She controls enough of the board to block the share transfer permanently. Vincent set down his wine glass carefully. I'll lose Sterling Innovations. Can't. You fight it? Show that we actually are married legally? The intent matters. We entered into the marriage fraudulently. That invalidates the original agreement with the trust. He turned to her. Charlie, I'm going to release you from the contract. You'll keep the full payment regardless. This isn't your burden to carry. What will you do? Vincent was quiet for a long moment, staring out at the city lights. I'll tell Margaret the truth. All of it. That yes, I entered into a contract marriage. That yes, I manipulated the situation. But that somewhere along the way, it became real. Charlie's breath caught. Vincent, I'm in love with you, Charlie. He said it simply, without drama. I don't know exactly when it happened. Maybe when you sat on the floor teaching Rosie about camera angles. Maybe when you brought coffee to my study at midnight because you knew I was working too late. Maybe it was immediate, that night in the garden when you looked at me like I was just another person instead of a billionaire. You can't mean that, Charlie whispered. The contract. Forget the contract. Vincent pulled the folder from his jacket pocket. Their original agreement, signed and notarized. He tore it in half. There, it's done. No more contract, no more arrangement, just the truth. Your company. Your grandmother will destroy you. Then she will. But I won't build my future on lies anymore. I won't lose the only real thing in my life trying to hold on to things that don't matter. He took her hands. You and Rosie matter. The rest, I can rebuild. Charlie felt tears spilling down her cheeks. I'm in love with you too. I tried not to be. I tried to keep it professional. But watching you with Rosie, seeing how hard you try, how much you care! Vincent kissed her then, and it was nothing like a contract. It was a promise, a beginning, a truth neither of them had been brave enough to speak until now. The next morning, Vincent stood before Margaret and the Sterling, Innovations Board and told them everything. He offered his resignation as CEO, relinquished his claim to the shares, and accepted full responsibility for the deception. Margaret sat in silence throughout his confession, her face unreadable. When he finished, she stood. "Walk with me, Vincent," she commanded. In her private study, Margaret poured 2 glasses of brandy despite the early hour. "You're willing to give up everything, for a woman you've known less than 3 months. For the woman I love, and for my daughter, who spoke yesterday for the first time in 2 years because of her." Margaret's stern expression cracked slightly. "Victoria called me. She told me about Rosie. Then you understand." "I understand that you finally found something worth fighting for besides market shares and profit margins." Margaret sipped her brandy. "Your grandfather gave up a considerable inheritance to marry me. His family said I was unsuitable, that he was throwing away his future. He told them his future was wherever I was."